So, why did Microsoft make the decision to move on-premise NAV to SaaS Business Central? There are a few reasons. The first is scalability. When you're in the cloud, you have the capability of using all the power of the data center that Microsoft provide, whereas if you're running an on-premise version, you're restricted by the capacity of your server and potentially have to upgrade and replace that periodically. Accessibility. With Business Central in the cloud, and in theory with any web version, you can access it from anywhere in the world on any platform. You don't need to have an installed client. You can be sitting on the beach in the Bahamas in the middle of lockdown and still access it on your iPhone. Integration. Microsoft are increasingly developing and pushing their Power Platform and other solutions, and being in the cloud allows easier integration to Business Central from those software. And a lower total cost of ownership. Without having to buy and maintain your own servers, you can save a vast amount of cost. Moving to the Business Central, it's the same licensing cost, whether you're running it in the cloud or on-prem if you're paying on a monthly basis. So there is a cost saving to be made by having Business Central running in the cloud. And it's also consistent costs. So you know that on a month-by-month basis, how much you'll be paying for the licenses that you've got with Business Central. So with the move from on-prem to a SaaS environment, there were three key challenges facing Microsoft. I'm sure there are many more, but these are the major ones. The first one is hosting. So if you're moving to a cloud environment, how are you going to be hosting your solution? The second one is the client and user interface. When it was on-prem, and previously there were installed versions of clients. That doesn't work if you want to run a true SaaS environment. And the third is the development environment and the processes associated with development. The first one is hosting. That was an easy fix for Microsoft. They've got something called Microsoft Azure, which you might have heard of, or Azure, as the Americans like to call it. So a little bit of information about Azure. It is the most secure online hosting solution in the world, and Microsoft spend approximately $1 billion per annum on security with Microsoft Azure. There are 90 plus compliance offerings, including 50 that are specific to regions and countries around the world. So for instance, after Brexit, if you have a particular requirement for meeting EU legislation, you could have one data center sitting within the EU, and you can have one data center sitting within the UK, which potentially might have different compliance levels going forwards. Azure is so stable and so competitive, it's used by Microsoft's own competitors. So SAP hosts their own ERP solution on the Microsoft Azure platform. Increasingly in this day and age, green, renewable, carbon neutral are some keywords that people like to pay attention to. So the Microsoft Azure data centers are all carbon neutral, and they're also currently, at the last count, 44% powered by renewable energy sources. So the move to the web, it's been a bit of a stop-start process for Microsoft. They initially attempted it back with version 2013. And on the screen here, you can see one of the earlier versions. They tried to recreate the existing Windows client in a browser-based environment. However, they found that this had major limitations and the approach wouldn't work for future development they wanted to go through and put into the product. So about 3 or 4 years ago, they completely rebuilt the UI from the ground up. So it's been designed from scratch specifically to work in a browser. This has given them greater flexibility and control over what they're doing. You'll notice there's less icons, it's more text-based now, which means it's not having to cache a lot of information in the background, which gives it a lower overhead within the browser. The dev environment has also changed majorly. Previously, the environment was a bespoke environment built by Navision about 20 or 25 years ago that you carried out the development in, and it was in a special code called cow code, which was very specific and only used by Navision. They've now migrated, so all development is now carried out in Visual Studio. This is a standard application from Microsoft that's used for multiple applications all around the world. Developers use it every day, which means it's very familiar. The removal of the cow code has meant they've brought in something called AL code, which is a slightly different version of it. It's similar in structure and syntax, but it's more recognizable to people that are coming new to the channel. So when we're bringing in developers, there are now quicker training times because the structure of the code is more familiar to them, and because the environment they're working in, Visual Studio, is more familiar to them. It means it's a quicker process to ramp them up to actually start developing in the system. So this brings us on to events and extensions. You might have heard these phrases from people that have been working with you or read them on the web at some point. I'm not going to be too technical about these, so if I am, I apologize. But to give you an idea about what they are and why they are used, technology that supports true SaaS. So SaaS being in the cloud, you not having access to the back end, for instance. It allows us to easily upgrade solutions. When we use events and extensions, it's very quick and easy to migrate functionality that's been developed from one system to another, which also means it's repeatable. So we can develop solutions and very easily deploy them. So what are events? First of all, we have to go back to the past. Previously in Navision and NAV, you could amend the core code in the system. We had access to all the same code that Microsoft had access to. So we could go into posting code units, tables, pages, and restructure those, add, remove code, do whatever we wanted to it. However, the end result of that was, whilst it meant we had the ability to do pretty much anything we wanted in the system, it was very unwieldy from an upgrade perspective. We had to plow through thousands or potentially even millions of lines of code, pick out those lines of codes that have been changed, and then work out where to move them to in the new upgraded versions. There were some tools to do this, but it could be a very manual, arduous process to make sure it actually been carried out correctly. And this wasn't practical for regular updates. So in the past, people have upgraded the system maybe every 5 years or so. So the future is the core code is more or less protected in the system. In theory, for an on-premise installation of Business Central, we can change the base application, but it's not massively recommended. We can keep away from that. Ideally, we will do. Instead, Microsoft built in something called events throughout the system. And these events they're like hooks. So they have hooks all through the code in the system that you can then hook into from outside. So they will publish data out from these events. You can then subscribe to pick up the data and then push it back into the system. And what are extensions? Extensions are exactly that. They're extension to the base application, the base data and user interface of Business Central. An extension can contain events, bespoke events, and also bespoke logic, and can link into events that are in the core base app of Business Central. Once you've built these extensions, they are packaged as an app, which is effectively plug and play. So you can list them on app source, you can pass them out to a customer, and they can either run a script if they're on-prem, or from the interface itself with the SaaS environment, actually upload and install these applications themselves. Very simple, very easy. There's no need to go to a back-end development environment anymore to install bespoke functionality. So there's a little diagram I put together here to try and explain the principle of an extension. So on the left here in the green, we've got the base application. And if you think about a very, very simple process, you might enter an order, you'd post the document, and that will then create some entries in the system. You can build an extension, which is this blue section over here, which has a page extension in it. So that page extension might be some additional fields that you see on the order, but when presented to the user, it all appears as a single order page. Then when you go through the posting process, we can use event subscriptions to manipulate the data through that process. And then any additional data we want to record, we can post into an entry table extension. So this is an extension to the base entry table. But when a user looks at it, it appears as a single table to the end user. So what does this mean for you? If we were talking about the SaaS environment, there's no server hardware requirements. You can do away with that server sitting in the corner or your bespoke server room with all its air conditioning units and fancy fire suppression. You can move to monthly updates. So Microsoft now have a system whereby they release biannual waves. So in April and October of each year, they release wave 1 and release wave 2. Every month in between that, they also release monthly updates. And I'll explain a little bit more about the life cycle in a moment. There is now, in the latest version 17, controlled activation of these new features. So rather than you just being forced to take on the new features as and when they're released, there is a page you can go to and you can activate it at your own pace. So if you know that a piece of functionality might impact on the process in the business, you can choose to delay it for a short period of time before activating it. Eventually, these new pieces of functionality will be enforced in the system, but it gives you, I think, it's a 90-day period for you to manage how you release it into your business. If you're an on-prem customer, you are benefiting already from these SaaS structural changes. So the move to AL and Visual Studio and events and extensions means that going forward there'll be quicker upgrades, even if you remain on premise. You have ability to access the App Source. So Microsoft App Source is a shop, if you like, you can go to and buy additional apps and download and install them into your environment. There is a migration part of the cloud. So Microsoft have given us the ability to set up a hybrid solution. This allows us to link your on-prem solution to a cloud solution and migrate the data across into it. Microsoft are constantly improving and working on this process. So going forwards, I think that will be a path that will be taken up by more and more people. You also have the support cycle change, which I'm about to talk about in the next slide. So this is a move from the old 5 and 10 year support life cycle. So Microsoft have now introduced the modern lifecycle policy. What this effectively means is after every release wave, you get 6 months of full support. So you get new features released, you get bugs and regulatory fixes released in that 6-month period, and that's with the monthly updates. They then provide an additional 12-month support, which includes bugs and regulatory fixes that are required. After that 12-month period, that version is effectively off of support. So that's come into effect from version 15, which was the October release in 2019. So going forward, there's effectively 18 months support. This sounds scary, particularly bear in mind that historically it was a 5-year support cycle. But the idea is that with the new approach to development and with the extensions, it's a much quicker and easier process to upgrade. Which then brings us on to a new offering which Dynamics Consultants will be bringing out in the near future. We are going to be offering, and these details are still to be confirmed, a on-prem subscription upgrade. So the cost will be based on the development complexity within your system, the number of companies and the volumes of data that you have. Then for a fixed monthly fee, we'll give you the option to upgrade once a year. You don't have to take that option if you don't want to, but you pay on a monthly basis and you have that ability to upgrade once a year. The upgrades will be triggered by you. So you need to discuss with us and say, when is the best time for us to upgrade your system? So we can schedule this for quieter times. Obviously, we have a number of customers in different industries and different businesses that are busier at different times of the year. This enables us and yourselves to better plan upgrades. So we can schedule these in on a regular basis and ensure that you are kept up to date, even with an on-prem solution, with the latest version of the software. So details of this will be coming out in the next couple of months. So listen out for those. If you've got any queries or questions with them, please talk to myself or Catherine or Tom Jenkins. So this brings me to the end. If anyone has any questions, we will take those now. Thank you very much.